Hello, and welcome to another segment of Elder Abuse Awareness Virtual Coalition. My name is Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be talking with the Director of the Orange County Office of the Aging, Anne-Marie Maglione, and Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center of Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College, Dr. Larry Force. So Anne-Marie, would you like to introduce our topic today, and it's the role of the first responder?
Thank you. I'd be delighted. Thank you, everyone who is tuning in. You know, this is season 2, and we have gotten so many positive feedbacks and comments about how much people need this and appreciate it. And it really, it's something we knew, but it's nice to hear it from other people. We know that elder abuse is an epidemic, and during these strange times that we're living in, this makes it even worse. What happens when you do elder abuse? You isolate someone, and isn't that what we're all doing now during this pandemic? And now that we're going into the fall season, we're going into flu season, it does seem like we're going to have a second wave, and people have been anxious and depressed and lonely during this first wave, and they're feeling like, okay, I lived through this, I can do it. Now to feel that a second wave is coming on top of flu season, on top of the weather getting cold, it just promotes a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiousness. So we have a very, very special guest that deals with just that, and I think it's going to be able to give us a lot of insight and guidance. And Dr. Force, would you like to introduce Geri?
I will. Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you, Alyssa, for stitching this all together. My name is Dr. Larry Force, and I'm a professor of psychology at Mount St. Mary College and director of the Center on Aging and Disability Policy, along with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Jeffrey Kahana. We are so glad to be here and have the opportunity to be part of the voice of elder abuse awareness. I think, you know, we've spent a little bit of time, but I think I want to go over it again, how we arrived here. We arrived here out of a consortium effort. We decided because of COVID that we would go virtual. We thought we would have 10, 11 video casts, which we did, that we called season 1. And we're here today because of the support of Steve Newhouse and Orange County, because of the fact that he gets it. And as a result of him getting it, he's willing to support and be part of, and having his administration be part of this, I think, this extremely valuable opportunity. You know, as Anne-Marie said, we're living in a new world, COVID. As a result of that, there are increases in addictions, there are increases in child abuse, there's increases in elder abuse. And we feel really, really good about the fact that we have the opportunity to be here, to be present, because the overarching goal is you don't have to do this alone. Although, you know, things are different, the one thing that has remained constant, and that was obvious with Tim Murphy last week from Adult Protective Services, is they're on the job. They're available. They're a phone call away. Our goal is to be able to highlight this issue of elder abuse awareness in a virtual platform. That's why we call it Virtual Coalition. The coalition is not only local, but our reach now is through the state. Our reach now is through the federal national network. And you'll meet other guests along the way. Today, we're honored to have Dr. Geri Abbatiello. If this is a 35-minute video cast, I could spend an hour and 35 minutes talking about Dr. Abbatiello. Dear friend, true friend, and she has been so present for so many people in difficult times. And she does it with a knowledge base and a warmth that is unmatched. And with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Dr. Geri Abbatiello and start this discussion about the role of the first responder. As we know from our focus on season 2, the specific focus is for veterans, for people in nursing homes, and for families with family members with special needs. And Geri, as we all know and love her by the name Geri has been present for all of those groups and more. So, Geri, at this point, it's an honor to have you here. And if we could start that discussion, maybe some of your experiences, what you've witnessed, what you advise, and the recommendations that you could give people, individuals, families, and agency staff. So thank you.
You're welcome. So given what Anne-Marie says and what's happening in our society with COVID, we're worried about fragile populations. And the fragile population includes specifically people that are in housing of nursing homes, assisted livings, veterans administration homes, and people with developmental disabilities, as well as people that are on the boundary of dealing with issues of life and aging in and of itself. So the notion that we are going to ask people to watch who they see and how they're going to survive over another period of isolation is frightening to all of us. And what we need to be able to do is identify that I'm at risk, you're at risk. Who are the people that we're talking about? So we've identified for this conversation the folks who are dealing with isolation, living alone, and that isolation gets worse. And we've seen people that have been actually experiencing PTSD, that traumatic disorder, as a result of watching so much negative television and predictions that it's hard to get out of that. The other part, we noticed that people who are in their homes alone, who may already have been lonely and were now just starting to get out and being able to go to the store, even with the restrictions, are now maybe looking at not doing that again for some time. The issue of being in nursing homes where the lifestyle, pardon me, was actually focused around groups, and now are much more restricted. So they're not allowed out of their rooms, and food is being served into their personal room, but they're not having the interaction. And we're very frightened of what it would be like to be stuck in the room again. The folks in being able, with disabilities, having to be able to go out and visit their families or be taken out in groups, are no longer going to be able to do that again. And we have to be the ones who say, no, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. And just to deal humanly with the notion of people, again, all going to be restricted. And we're already watching certain things happen. For instance, there's an incredible rise in alcohol use in the population across the nation. And it's higher in women. So we want to be watching women. And I've experienced where a woman was able to call out for the alcohol she needed and then would actually have falls. So we would get calls that she'd fallen again, and we're worried. And well, she's not going shopping, so how is she falling? And when someone goes to their home, they can find that there are bottles, and you know that she actually, in addition to normal things that make people fall, she's forgotten to take her medication. She's used the alcohol to survive, and we hear that from all of our friends and colleagues. The caregivers are going and they're looking at what can make them feel better. And we all self-treat, and self-treating isn't always the best way to go. In the literature that we've seen pop up since COVID started, we're noticing an incredible amount of anxiety. I've had people call me and tell me that I am not an anxious person and I don't know what to do with my anxiety. People who were never depressed are depressed because we're bound as human beings to be connected. And especially people who are needing that in order to feel that they're still with this world. And older, frail people who might have some disabilities are going to be in that category. People who were already having some mental illness, and I use that word in a broad way because what we're saying in terms of mental illness is there's an exacerbation of anxiety disorders, an exacerbation of depression. So people who were on medications are, number one, at risk for not taking the medications as directed. And number two, the medication isn't sufficient in the situation that they're finding themselves in. The idea that you are the caregiver and now you can't go in the room and sit with somebody and hold their hand in order to maintain the kind of isolation that we want. We have to get very creative how we're going to help someone who's now locked in their room. And using and a lot of older people and families are using FaceTime, and they're having parties online and everything. But to bring this to another level of isolation is something that people are already anticipating. To see the president, after all this time, is now dealing with the same disease that we have been trying so hard to deal with through isolation, through washing your hands, being respectful of where you go if you're sick. All of those have been very important. The veterans have come to us with their own residual, and in a study that I did on the meaning of loss, I found that one loss triggers the reaction and links it to many other losses. So this loss of maybe your family, of the way you lived in your life, how you went for your walks or how you took care of yourself, you have then touching in and linking with a lot of other losses. So we're not just seeing who the person is as they're experiencing COVID now, as they're worried about whether they'll get it, as they're worried about how they're going to manage being in their home. But also, do they remember then the other very isolated, lonely times? And the veterans have some unique experiences with that, in that they may have been in foxholes, and they may have been left in the woods someplace while they were fighting. And that trauma gets re-triggered and reignited in the context of being now in a situation where I have so much less control.
I just want to say one thing, because you highlight a very important point. When we talk about elder abuse, it's typically framed out as this is something that's happening to you by someone, an external agent of some sort. But the thing that you also bring up is how we take care of ourselves. Elder abuse being done to you by you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, there are different terms for it. Neglecting self-care, neglecting, whatever terminology you want to use, it usually starts with the word neglect. But, from where you sit, and I think the points you've made have been right on target. What's your take on this idea of people abusing themselves, the perception, and how they can stop it, or how they can, because it's not a question of, no one's going to call, at least I don't have any evidence that there have been, in my experience clinically, of someone calling elder abuse hotlines on themselves.
Right.
But the question is, it better than anybody else does. I always give the example of, whether it be the onset of a disease trajectory like Alzheimer's. I drive my car. I'm the first one that knows that something's wrong. but I'm not a mechanic. So I take it to a mechanic, and then I'm told what's wrong, and then it's repaired. I often think about that with the onset of disease. I'm the first one that knows that something's wrong. You know, it might be family members that then find out at a later point, but I'm the first one that knows. So people that are watching this, or people that are providing care and presence to older individuals, I think that whole sensitivity about how do you go about recognizing, acknowledging, and correcting when the abuse is really coming from within.
It's a very good point. So often when people are starting to recognize that things are out of control, at first I just decide I won't take a pill, or I'm not going to eat the way I usually eat and take care of myself, or I recognize something is different about the way I'm thinking or feeling, and I know something's amiss, but I may not be able to see exactly what it is. I was talking with a client the other day, and she said, I'm physically different, but I was unable to say how she was different. And then I asked her, well, what else is happening? And she said, well, I can't, my thoughts are kind of going around and I'm not sure. So part of what we need to be able to do is invite people to share that, those changes. You know, how are things for you? And we have to be able to afford an openness to listen, because it's very hard in a home where someone may be complaining every day about how things are going and where the food is coming from and what kind of food it is and who's getting their medications. And to know that you're having side effects. And yet, when you go to call and speak with a provider, you're told you have to do it on television or the computer, if you will. The notion that I have to be able to somehow articulate it so caregivers can help people by asking questions about what makes this difficult for you. You know, what stands between you and feeling really good. And so they might start using words that I'm much more anxious, I'm not sleeping. You know, how are you sleeping? Are you sleeping through the night? Are you taking naps during the day? And so the idea that we have to be asking how much of your food are you eating? Because self-neglect is kind of a word that means something to us, but I don't think it means something in the middle of feeling anxious and depressed. I think you just don't have energy. And so maybe we should be saying, when you are feeling this lack of energy and enthusiasm for your day, and you get up every day thinking it's the same, you know, how are you dealing with that? And to ask, what are some of the things that are changing inside them? So when they decide not to take the medicines because it's not working, you know, the idea is they may come up with various interventions that may not be all that helpful. You know, especially in this age of alternative and complementary medicine, they're online, believe it or not, and they're checking, this is a medication that's going to work, and they order it online, and they start taking things that's mixing up with stuff. You know, even, you know, they may already be on antidepressant, and they were told online that they didn't need that because this works better. So what looks like neglect is actually, in my own eyes, maybe feeling less worthy, less valuable, less needed, less connected. And so we lose the ability to actually be optimistic and to be what in my profession is called self-efficacy, meaning that I can make things happen. As a caregiver, I need to be able to be very aware of that. I need to be able to ask, you know, what are you doing for yourself today? What good thing are you doing for yourself? You know, have you taken a nice warm shower? Have you taken your medication? And what happens if you don't? So the whole notion is bringing back some of the power that people feel like they no longer have. And in this COVID, we all feel kind of powerless. And we're all kind of doing a little self-neglect. We're not following the same diet. And if you're on a special diet, and most aging people are, you you can't afford to be off these diets. If you're not taking your medicine because feeling hopeless and helpless, those things we have to be able to identify. And when I speak to some people who may even be getting so agitated because they're so upset, it looks like they are trying to fight us. And in fact, what they are doing is trying to put their hands around something that seems so much bigger, or even slips through their fingers that they don't know what's actually happening. As the caregiver, we all need to develop some skills in helping people remember who they are. We need to.
Can I ask you a question? When you were talking about how it seems like they try to fight us, do you think that's fear on the person's part?
Yeah, I think it's definitely fear. I think what happens is, you know, if I'm helpless and hopeless and you're not doing anything for me, I need to project that out. I need to say, I can't do it for myself. And then I need to say that it's not my fault, it's yours. And so
Right.
I become more agitated, more anxious, more frightened. And, you know, and that's something we have to be able to look as caregivers and not take on face value. Yeah, am I making myself clear for that
No,
part?
I absolutely agree with you. And you know, from my lens, we deal with the caregiver. So we have the caregiver that maybe has lost their job, or you know, mom who they're caring for is exactly what you just described, and is lonely and anxious and angry and fearful. And I'm at my wit's end too, because what she doesn't know is I don't know how I'm going to pay my electric bill, and I can't stand her right now, and I can't go out anywhere. So we're doing Zoom support groups. We used to do them once a month. Now we're doing them once a week, specifically for that, just to kind of pump up the caregiver, like, you're doing a great job. I know you're kind of going through hell right now, but you can do this. And I think that, you know, you made the point that we're social people, and we hunger for that. So when you don't have that, I think it makes it more difficult, which is why we're doing friendly visitor calls and we're reaching out to people. And sometimes just, you know, we have this lady that we talk to once a week, and she probably spends the first 20 minutes complaining about how terrible her daughter is. And she doesn't do this and she doesn't do that. But her daughter says after she gets off that call, she's much better. So sometimes you just need to let people vent, but you know, it's almost like peeling the onion back. We've got to make sure that the caregiver is healthy enough to take care of the care receiver, because that's when a different type of abuse starts to come in. It's tough times.
And Geri, can I build upon Anne Marie's point? You talked about an increase in addictions and, you know, the concerns about the world events and people being, you know, bombarded with these things. From where you sit, have you also noticed, like, which would almost be a normative expectation, an increase in like suicidal ideation? You know, because, I mean, are you seeing that?
What I'm seeing is that there is a rise in suicide in all the publications. I've not actually seen it in my little circle, but everything tells me I need to be watching for the people I'm taking care of, as well as the people that are taking care of them, because we think we just, somebody said to me, I didn't think it could get worse than it was, and it is. And so we need to be able to help someone recognize it, in fact, is getting worse. But we need to be able to somehow look beyond it. And one of the things that I talk about with folks, if you'll let me kind of not go into the suicide, because before that comes a lack of meaning. And so there are things that come that we can give and help people who are caring for others be hopeful. There's a precedence in society. Historically, these plagues come and people have made it through it. So let us give you some tools. You know, how are you taking care of yourself? Do you have a spiritual perspective? Do you have a way to speak to someone that you can just ramble for 20 minutes and they can help you say, and tell me something that would make you feel better now? How can I help? So because we don't want to feel helpless ourselves in helping someone, because that makes us stop listening. We want to hear what they have to say. So we listen to what they're most worried about. And then we ask, how did you make it through the other situation in your life? Remember when you had all of us and Daddy died and you still had to take care of us all? Remember when all of us were sick and you didn't feel good yourself and you still did it? You were so strong. That strength is in you. And see, we're also afraid that we're going to look inside and not see that strength. Yeah. So our roles as caregivers to the caregivers is you have what it takes. And when you forget, we're here to remind you.
Yeah. Redirect the conversation. I think that's a good idea. And I've always heard that to rewire your brain, you should think of 3 things you're grateful for every day, even if it's like, I was able to get my head off the pillow. Yeah, I think that's really smart.
And I think it really begins, as we talk about this, it really begins with the person. You know, just like, you know, you don't have to wait for an agency to arrive. On a personal level, the other day I got up and I said, before I got out of bed, I'm going to have the most productive day that I've had. I didn't even say in a long time, I'm going to have a very productive day. And that kind of set the tone. And at the end of the day, I had a really productive day. And I think that, you know, part of it begins with the language of how we talk to ourselves, not just about all the things that are going on in our lives, but that whole focus of staying in the moment, looking around, looking for the gratitude, as you talked about, Geri, Emery, the 3 things. But this idea of speaking to yourself differently, I think is important. I heard this term the other day, and I don't know where I heard it from. It was about 2 weeks ago. Somebody was talking about, yes, there's post-traumatic stress, but there's also post-traumatic growth. And I really like that. I like that term a lot, about post-traumatic, because look, we're all going through this at different levels, but we're all going through this new world, new mannerisms, new approaches, new boundaries, I mean, it's a new world. And this idea that we're going to go back to, you know, when's it going to go back to normal? I don't think all those patterns will be there.
We get a new normal, but we're never going to go back to the old normal.
But maybe, Geri, you could talk a little bit about how a person, whether it be a first responder, you know, because we talked about the role of the first responder, but they're not always in uniform. First responders are many times dressed as family members, and that's what they are. Right. So what would you recommend as a way, a concrete, realistic, direct way that somebody could start to do something different right now in order to enhance their well-being?
So what you mentioned about the intention for yourself for today is incredibly important. And the research that is on neurobiology now speaks to the fact that as I change my mind and how I decide to let that happen is going to be very important, that it lights up different parts of the brain and there's more activity. For instance, saying that I want, today I will have some moments of peace, and then committing yourself to doing that. So when people are telling me how horrible things are, and in fact they might be very horrible, one of the things I ask them is, is it possible to look at this in a different way? I even use this notion of a kaleidoscope, where someone is looking into the kaleidoscope. And if you only look at the darkness, which is what people that get stuck in PTSD, depression, and all that stuff, if you only look in the dark, then you'll only see dark, and you won't even see what's in your life, like the pieces of the kaleidoscope. There's nothing going to change. So if you go inside and you join with that personal wisdom, your spiritual guide, whoever, and you look in that light at the pieces in the kaleidoscope, and you turn your way of looking at it just a little, you will see something very different. You see color, you see texture, you see pieces. You don't take anything away from people. I can't make their life better by removing someone or putting somebody else into their situation, although we can help in those ways also. But my thinking is going to be very important when I go in and meet somebody who's suffering. I can say to somebody, how does this feel right this minute? And that brings them into that mindfulness that you're alluding to, Larry. If it doesn't feel good here, you've made a mistake. It's not a monumental mistake, but for this one moment, can you change the way you're looking at this? Can you think of one thing that inside you that can bring out and share with someone else? Because if I share that light that I see, or that inner wisdom that I have with you, and I see that in you, then my biology changes. The neurochemistry in my brain radically changes. And I can help you do it first by seeing it in you, and you actually begin to see it in yourself. But it takes work. We're not going to go in with a Band-Aid and put this on people and say, this is going to make you feel better. We're going to say, what if we could change that a little? What would make this a little bit better? So I'm stuck in this room, all right? Years ago, Norman Cousins did a research for himself as he was given a terminal disease, and he spent his whole day and evening watching comedy and video. We've lost humor here in the midst.
I was going to bring that up to you because I think humor is so, so important also.
Absolutely. And humor lights up those parts of our brain. It gives us a certain amount of ability to laugh at ourselves. It gives us the ability to move out of ourselves. And, we do a lot of dark humor in our professional lives. And people say, well, yeah, I look good now, but you should see me. Okay, but right this minute, darn, you look good. But being able to laugh and not making fun of people, watching some of the humor where the people talk about, whatever comedians talk about, I actually go out of my way, because if I can laugh, I can change that chemistry, and then I can look at you and listen to your story in a much easier fashion for me. As the caregiver, I want to be in a good mood to hear you.
Right.
And so I do things that make me in a good mood. I might do a little meditation before I speak to you. I might ask for help to listen to your call for help or your call for love. And all of that brings us into a whole different place, because we're going to listen just a little differently, as if we were turning the kaleidoscope just a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I had somebody that I talked to, and she's a caregiver, and she is a difficult mother. And her mother was this sweet, sweet, sweet lady until she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And she said she talks like a trucker. And she said we didn't even know she knew those words, and she uses them. And, you know, she called me one day and she was crying and she was just really desperate. And I said to her, this would make a great book. People would love this. They wouldn't believe it. She started laughing and she's like, I know. And the next time I talked to her, she goes, oh, I got the next chapter. Let me tell you what happened. But it totally changed the way she looked at it. Instead of feeling like I want to kill my mother, she's thinking, wow, if I tell people this, they're going to die laughing because they're not going to believe how terrible she is. So you're right. It's just the way you can switch things around and the way you approach it.
Right. And, you know, they're not just upset about the behavior right then. There's a loss there. Where is my mother?
Without a doubt.
You know, and so, you know, inside your mother's still there. And so, you know, remember that when you're looking at her. You know, the irony is your personality doesn't always follow you into dementia.
Right,
You know,
right.
some people actually get more pleasant. Some people are completely disinhibited, depending on the pathology that's going on in their brain. And if you're looking for someone to be normal in an abnormal situation, we don't see any evidence of that right now. But if you're seeing a situation that where someone was already starting off with some pathology and their brain wiring wasn't going the way it should, and they're already having fear and anxiety related to their dementia, depression, whatever, and they are now trying to deal with the fact that you're not there for them. And so they demand a lot more from you as the daughter or son or family member or caregiver. So they get frightened when they see fear in your eyes.
Right, right.
So, you know, let them see the humor in your eyes. So when you don't want to give it a lot of importance, we have to manage it for certainly, because though sometimes we'll have to medicate.
Yeah, and take it seriously. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So the idea that I can, as a provider, change the medications and make it a little easier for both of you, because we don't want people feeling that out of control. Some part of them knows something is really off. A family member is not only off by what they're seeing and having to deal with, but then they're off because it's dreadful to have to deal with something that may be aggressive, you know, off color, you know, and we're doing it within cultures. We have different cultures who accept certain things and certain cultures don't. So if you are in a culture like some of the Asian cultures or Latino cultures or some of you know, Afro-American or Jamaican cultures where parenting and your parent is so important, how do you want to take care of them? You can't do it without taking care of you.
Right.
And,
right.
And I think
you give yourself permission to lose your temper, and
Right.
then forgive yourself for doing it.
Right.
But I think that really sums up the message. You know, the idea that, you know, the role of the first responder. The role of the first responder is not really to be present for somebody else as much as it's to be present for themselves.
Right.
And this is not magic, and this is not the result of years and years of psychotherapy. What you've provided here today are tools and resources that somebody can implement when they turn off this video. You know, it's not a question of help is on the way, help has arrived. You know, as I continue to hear you speak over the course of the years that you and I have been friends, first of all, you know that I love you. On a personal level, I love you dearly. You are amazing as a friend. You are tremendous as a professional. And the words that come to my mind are what you bring to the table is really a compassionate knowledge base. I mean, not only do you know this stuff, but you lead from the heart. And I think that, you know, what we wanted to accomplish today, I think we've been very successful with doing that. So, Geri, thank you so much. Anne-Marie, any summary comments?
No, I mean, this was just spot on. So thank you so much. I think it's going to help people so much. If anyone would like further information, if they want to discuss something with us, please call our single point of entry line, which is our New York Connects, 845-615-3710. If you do think that you know someone that is experiencing some elder abuse, or if you recognize yourself that you've been self-neglecting, call Adult Protective Services. They'll be able to help you. It's 845-291-2800. And this is all confidential. So if you see somebody that's experiencing this, but you don't want them to get upset with you, call. It's confidential. We're here to help.
Thanks. Geri, any summary comment before we turn it back to Alyssa?
Yeah, if you don't mind, what I'd like to remind people is that they need to call their providers to let them know things are changing. Not only are they changing for the elder, and we can work with that, but they're changing for me. I am the caregiver, and I am losing it. I need help, because the provider wants to keep you in good health while you are there taking care of this elder. We don't want them to self-neglect. We don't want you to self-neglect. We don't want you to abuse each other. We want you to get the help you need.
Perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Alyssa?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Geri. This was fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us today. You've been listening to another segment of Elder Abuse Awareness Virtual Coalition. And if you want to hear this program again, share it with friends, or even leave a comment, please visit our website, www.elderabuseawarenessvirtualcoalition.com. There you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Well, we hope you would join us again next week as we continue our conversation.